Hey guys, welcome back to Interesting Video Wild Rift. So today we're back with a Zeri supplementary guide, and today we're going to be taking a look at a very interesting AP Zeri build. So this is one of those builds that I completely developed by myself. Now, as you guys know, most of the time, most builds that I use or most people use are pretty much either standard builds or builds kind of stolen from the top players. But once in a while, I do kind of play test and develop my own builds. Of course, we recently, actually it's not that recent, but a couple of weeks ago we had Tank Corki, which I developed, and now we have another build that I developed, which is going to be the AP DPS Zeri. Right, so let's go over how it works. So first off, your first item, you're going to start off with the Gluttonous Greaves, of course, for the early AD as well as the Omnivamp. Now, of course, the beauty of the Omnivamp is that it will, of course, work on AP as well, and considering you're doing DPS, it's still pretty much the best boots you can go for. So as you guys can see from the first two items, your build is going to start off as an AD build. So you're first going to start with the Terminus, a little bit of early AD as well as attack speed. You of course get the stacking resistances, but most importantly here, you also get the stacking penetration. So as you guys know, when you build AP, each AP item gives you 7% magic pen, but Terminus gives you 33% in one item. So this means that to hit the cap of 40%, you just need Terminus and one other AP item. So that's the main reason why Terminus is a viable item in a lot of AP builds like AP Varus and AP Kaisa as well. So I'm kind of using the same concept with AP Zeri. So as we know, Zeri can only attack the first target, so to solve that problem, we're going for Runan's Hurricane. Now, Runan's Hurricane, of course, allows you to attack 3 targets at the same time, and that will, of course, allow you to avoid just attacking the tank, and also Runan's can give you AP when it converts, right? So next up, we're gonna go for our first full AP item, the Riftmaker. Now, Riftmaker, of course, gives you 80 AP, ability haste as well as magic pen, giving you the maximum 40% magic penetration, but it also gives you 13%, or sorry, 11% Omnivamp, as well as the Void Corruption passive, which allows you to deal true damage after 3 seconds in combat. Now, with this build, you will be staying in combat for a very long duration, and you should be able to proc the Riftmaker pretty easily and then get a lot of damage out of that. Now, this will also convert Runans to an AP item, and Runans will now give you AP as well. Now, next up, we have Deathcap and Lichbane. Now, the order of which you build this is sort of a little bit of personal preference and a little bit of like game state dependent, because basically with Deathcap, you get a ton of AP because you're amplifying all the AP you already have. Right, but with Lichbane, you do get that Sheen passive, which you can proc very, very often considering Zeri's Q is very spammable, thereby giving you a lot of extra damage as well. Now, I've tried it both directions, and I kind of think that both ways kind of work, so I really think it's a little bit more of personal preference as to whether you want to go for Lichbane first or Deathcap first. Now, most of the time I actually go for Lichbane first, despite what it shows here in the picture, but you can also go Deathcap first. So for the runes, it's pretty much Conqueror with the standard ADC loadout. Conqueror because Zeri doesn't need lethal tempo for attack speed because she has an attack speed cap, and with 2 attack speed items, the Terminus and the Rudans, you already hit the cap. So Conqueror, giving you the Omnivamp as well as the AD/AP later on, is going to be even more helpful than lethal tempo. Then, of course, you're Brutal because you auto-attack a ton, Giant Slayer to deal with the tanks, as well as Alacrity for the attack speed, and finally Bone Plating for the defensive capabilities. And other than that, of course, your spells, you go for Flash. Ghost is the most ideal because you can zoom around in fights, but if you need something like Cleanse or Exhaust, do go for that, of course. And with that said, let's move on to the gameplay. Alright, so now let's take a look at the gameplay. So as you guys can see, in this particular game, I actually went for Ghost because I felt there wasn't a lot of use of Cleanse, Exhaust, or even Barrier, I guess you could say. And I thought Ghost is pretty much going to be the best option for this fight, for this game, right? Because nothing much to really cleanse. I mean, you do have like the Victor Force Field, the Wither from Nasus, or the Volley Bear Stun, maybe even Yuumi Ult, maybe even Jinx Traps, but none of these are huge CC spells that you really need to cleanse. And what I mean by that is huge CC spells are things like Ahri's Charm, Lux's Root, where if you get hit by it, you're going to get full comboed in just one shot. So none of these CC spells are those kind of spells. So I think going for Ghost is fine. Alright, so here we have a battle of the hyper carries. We have Zeri Milio versus Jinx Yuumi. Now, as you guys know from seeing a lot of my recent Jinx videos, Jinx Yuumi is an incredibly strong lane. Of course, in lane, you're just like decent, right? You have sustain, you have poke with the Jinx rockets. I can see here she's trying to step up to launch the rockets at us, or at Milio in this case. And in the late game, you have insane Jinx scaling, you have insane Yumi scaling and healing, but you can have a lot of similar things with Zeri, right? Because Zeri with Milio is also really solid. Zeri has just as good of scaling as Jinx. Of course, the only thing about Zeri versus Jinx is that Zeri can only really hit the first target and is shorter range, whereas Jinx has longer range and can hit multiple targets. However, Zeri and Jinx damage is very, very competitive. And I actually think that most of the time Zeri does a little bit more damage than Jinx if Jinx doesn't get a reset. Right? Of course, Jinx is a very reset-dependent champion, and of course with Milio, you kind of cover up your weakness of having short range. Now, Zeri on paper actually has the longest range of every ADC, even compared to Caitlyn. If you take, because you know when you auto, you launch 7 bullets. Like you see every auto attack, you launch 7 bullets. Technically, the 7th bullet launches to a very, very far range. However, in practice, that like getting hit by 1 bullet is nothing, right? You need to be getting hit by all 7 bullets for it to be very effective, and because of that, Zeri's range is not actually as long as it actually appears. Right, so basically, Zeri's range is pretty much that of a standard ADC. Jinx has a range advantage. However, with the Milio, we do get the extra range. Look at this, the extra range to auto attack the Jinx with. Now here, Volibear is coming in for a gank. We're only level 4. In a flash away, trying to get to the fruit, and Poppy is now coming in, misses the ult completely because Volibear hops over the wall with the flash. And now Poppy is coming in for a gank, forces the flash onto Jinx. Now me and Milio are trying to follow, and we barely get there just to zap the Volibear to get the first blood as our wave is crashing into the tower. It's pretty surprising, honestly, how Zeri and Milio can actually compete with Jinx and Yumi in the early game. I say that because Yumi has insane healing, right? And Milio does not. Like, he does have the healing on his W, but his healing is not as much as Yumi, right? So I didn't really expect to be out trading the Yumi and Jinx. Like, initially we did, of course, have a situation where we were getting out traded by them, and then after we kind of turned it around and out traded them ourselves, which I'm not really sure how that happened, to be very honest. But yeah, the matchup is a lot stranger than I would have imagined. So we spent a lot of time talking about Zeri, Milio, and the lane matchup. But what about this AP build, right? So why have I gone for this funky AP build on Zeri? Well, basically, I'm a firm believer that if the enemy team has tanks, you need mixed damage. You cannot be having a full AD team, and that's exactly what we have, right? Aatrox, Poppy, and Yasuo are all AD. Milio, of course, is the support and doesn't really do any significant damage as we go into all in here, where we are out trading them once again, and they're very, very close to dying, but we're not quite going to be able to reach. We almost get the kill there, but unfortunately we do not. There's still kind of 1 HP sticking around, but we don't have any tools to really go in and kill them, so unfortunately we're not going to quite be able to get them. Right, so we're full AD team, right? So of course you can't really control what your mid laner, your jungler, or your top laner, or even your support picks. You can only really control what you pick, right? So if I'm picking late enough in the pick order, which in this case I was, I will have to go something that is AP, right? So since I don't really want to play mages in the bot lane, I mean I do play Ziggs here and there, but aside from them, I don't really play any like mages in the bot lane nowadays. So I gotta kind of pick an ADC who can build AP. So my choices are champions like Varus, champions like Kai'Sa, and then of course you have the more funky AP picks like AP Ezreal, for example, AP Zeri, things like that, right? So in this particular case, I developed this AP Zeri build. I tested it out in like a normal game, and I realized that it worked out pretty well. Pretty similar to how a normal Zeri build would work, right? And so you can see here that we are running down the Jinx and Yumi is able to escape. So basically, this build, I've tested it, it does work, and it is pretty effective. So I decided to go for this AP pick, of course, just to ensure that our team comp is not hard countered by Nasus and Volibear, right? Because what Nasus and Volibear are just going to be doing is just stacking armor, right? You can see Nasus has armor boots, he has Bramble Vest, Volibear is rushing a Triforce, but afterwards I would think that he would go for some armor items. So if you are as a tank against a full AD or full AP team, now full AP teams are rare in Wild Rift, but I've seen it before. So if you have like a full AP team or a full AD team, the tanks are going to be completely OP in that matchup, simply because they can just stack health and one defense, and there's no one who can break through their resistances. Of course, unless they decide to run in 1v5 or something like that. But in general, tanks are going to be OP in this spot, right? So you never want to have a team of full AD or full AP for the most part. Of course, there are situations where you're playing into no tanks, and full AD or full AP is actually fine because there's no one who's going to actually counter the full AD team. But here, Jinx is getting CC'd by Poppy. Poppy forces Jinx's flash and ghost. Poppy has been coming in with some relatively effective ganks. I say it's effective because forcing summoner spells is still a huge advantage. Here, Volibear is coming in for a counter gank now. And overall, we're not too afraid. We have 2 kills currently. We are 1.5k gold ahead of the Jinx, who has only a death. We are on our first item spike. Jinx and Yuumi have just bat and picked up her first item as well. So now we're on more even terms. But here Volibear is coming in. We're just going to blast him. He ults in onto the Milio, is running the Milio down. However, his bot lane is not quite here yet. He is getting bursted way too fast and he ends up going down. His bot lane has finally reached the premises, but here comes Yasuo. So Jinx and Yuumi have to kind of run out of there. Poppy is here as well. We're going to be blasting down this tower, and we're probably going to be getting the first tower of the game off of this tower. Poppy, however, is still on the chase for Jinx. Jinx is free stacking her lethal tempo onto the Poppy, which is one of the problems if you are chasing a lethal tempo ADC and you can't reach them, is they free stack lethal tempo, and you could technically end up killing your team by letting the ADC free stack lethal tempo, because the attack speed and the range you get from lethal tempo is, pretty whack, right? So here, now we've gotten the top lane tower, we're rotating to mid to catch the wave. Poppy tries to go for a smack of Victor into the wall, but barely misses the wall itself. So unfortunately, they don't quite get the Victor here. And here, I was trying to take over mid lane, but there are those mid laners that basically refuse to go anywhere else but mid. So you can see Yasuo here just AFK runs mid instead of going to defend top. So this forces me to base and rotate top myself using the gate. Now thankfully with the gate you can rotate there relatively quickly. Now Milio is taking a beating from the Jinx. Jinx still has ult, so here I'm standing in front of her to prevent her from ulting Milio. And we finally are able to get the kill, and unfortunately Volibear jumps into the tower and finishes off the kill onto Milio. However, looks like we are going to be able to get him, and Yuumi comes as a free side dish off of the kill of Volibear. So overall we got all 3 kills there. Milio did get 1, but basically we end up killing all of them, so we did get a 1-for-3 trade, which is pretty worth it. And at this point I'm getting so fed that it honestly may not even really matter if I build full AD at this point, because of the fact that I'm so fed, it basically just means that the enemy team probably can't deal with my damage anyway. However, of course, I'm still gonna go for the AP build because of the reasons that we discussed just now. So that's what I'm gonna be doing. My team is all kind of doing decent for the most part. We have leads, huge leads actually, in the top lane, the jungle, the ADC department, and support as well. Of course, mid lane is slightly behind, playing tank Yasuo. I'm not sure who is still playing tank Yasuo in this day and age when Riot has nerfed Yasuo's base stats and basically nerfed tank Yasuo out of the game. It's really not that good anymore. However, there are still people playing it, and I guess it still works, right? But he basically has a Heartsteel into a QSS at the moment with magic resist boots. The only magic resist here is really Victor. Of course, Volley does do some magic damage as well. Like here, we're obviously not going to kill Volley, but we're just free hitting him just to get Conqueror stacks, as well as just to get some poke. Then we're going to get this tower. And now my team is all kind of grouping mid. And if the enemy team don't respond, we can just keep pushing, right? There's no reason to stop if enemy team is not going to stop us. Here, Jinx and Yuumi struggling to defend their base. Nasus runs into our entire team and basically is just getting run down, right? I mean, you cannot be running into an entire enemy team even if you are a tank, right? So Nasus goes to 0-3 and 0, not really contributing very much to his team here. And now we're going to be going for the mid lane inhibitor because no one is stopping us, so we're just blasting However, we are running out of waves. Of course, making sure I stand in front of Melio so he doesn't get hit by the Jinx ult. Now here Dragon is spawning. Volley is 1 HP doing the Dragon, right? So here, like you guys saw on the minimap on the skull, you saw he was 1 HP and he ran to the Dragon. Now Aatrox is taking the gate. Me and Melio are making our way there. Volibear is stuck on the wall, has to ult out of the wall. And here we're just hitting Nasus over the wall. Now I'm gonna go ahead and focus the Dragon. And Volley and Nasus are getting distracted by the Aatrox here. And Poppy comes in with the smite. Dragon secured. And now we can go for the fight if the fight happens. However, since the fight doesn't happen, we're instead going to go for this huge wave in the top lane. Look at that wave. That's like a kill's worth of goal at the minimum, right? So we get the huge wave. And now we back probably got enough for the Riftmaker. Finally making it an AP build. There we go. So Riftmaker now online, making this a full AP. Not full AP, but an AP Zeri build. So now, hopefully we can find a nice fight. I mean, we're 6-0 and 1, right? So we're of course in a very good spot. So we should be able to win, you know, almost any fight. The enemy team really only has 3 kills in total. We have a 10k gold lead against the enemy right now. Volibear is getting a objective bounty, which is fine, but this allows us to get Baron, right? So we need Aatrox to basically stop Volibear from coming. We can easily get Baron. Even if the rest of his team shows up at Baron, it should be fine because we are very far ahead of them and we can easily win the fight. The only real fear here is a Volibear smite steal, which is not going to happen because Aatrox and Volibear are fighting in the top lane. It looks like Aatrox is even going to kill Volibear. Aatrox running him down, Aatrox with the flash. Now intense 1v1 in the top lane. We get the Baron in the meanwhile. Jinx does get the objective bounty in the mid lane though. I'm not sure if they knew we were doing Baron, but whether they did or they didn't, Jinx definitely did the right thing by just getting a free objective bounty instead of contesting Baron when her jungler was not around. Now I recall pick up a QSS just because they are basically 1 CC per enemy champion. It's just that, I mean, as you guys saw, right, we obviously didn't need cleanse. We never really were in a state where we get CC'd and we die. However, this is just like an extra insurance policy that if Nasus withers us, we're not going to get run down by, for example, Volibear, who's going to stun us and then change DC into something else. So just getting that QSS is always going to be nice. Here Volibear is going in 1v5. I'm not sure why they're doing this. I mean, Volibear is actually surviving, but not for long. Gets in the tower, but we just chase him down. Nasus now trying to do the same thing. We pop the ulti and we're just running people down. Now, I'm not sure who's tanking the tower. It's not me, so I'm just going to keep on running. Now, here is where it gets dangerous, right? So Poppy dies to the tower, gets the reset, and this is a possible like Jinx pentakill. However, thankfully, the ignite does come down from the Yasuo and Jinx ends up dying to the ignite, which now allows us to basically end the game because Yuumi cannot really defend the tower by himself. Milio gets executed by the base. I'm stealing the shield off of the base, which is pretty funny, and not just blasting the base while Aatrox is having a little bit too much fun. I'm just gonna go for the win, like so, and there we have it for the video. So I'm gonna leave you guys with the stats as usual. Thank you guys so much for watching the video, and goodbye.